Where's Mrs. Hirsch? The days of September passed one after the other, much the same. Emery and Ellen walked to school together and home again, always now taking the longer way, avoiding the tall soldier and his partner. Christy dawdled behind them or scampered ahead of them, never out of their sight. The two mothers had their coffee together in the afternoons. Then they began to knit mittens as days grew slightly shorter and the first leaves began to fall from the trees, because another winter was coming and everyone remembered the last one. There was no fuel now for the homes and apartments in Copenhagen, and the winter nights were terribly cold. Like the other families in the building, the Johansen had opened up their old chimney and installed a little stove to use for heat when they could find coal to burn. Mamma used it too, sometimes for cooking, because electricity was rationed now. At night, they used candles for light. Sometimes Ellen's father, a teacher, complained in frustration because he couldn't see in the dim light to correct his students' papers. Soon we'll have to add another blanket to your bed, Mamma said in the morning as she and Anne Marie tidied up the bedroom. Christy and I are lucky to have each other for warmth in the winter, Anne Marie said. Poor Ellen, to have no sisters. She will have to snuggle in with her mamma and papa when it gets cold, Mamma said, smiling. I remember when Christy slept between you and papa. She was supposed to stay in her crib, but in the middle of the night she would climb out and get in with you, Anne Marie said, smoothing the pillows of the bed. Then she hesitated a glance at her mother, fearful that she had said the wrong thing, the thing that would bring that pained look to her mother's face. The days when Christy slept with Mamma in Papa's room were the days when Lisa and Anne Marie shared this bed. But Mamma was laughing quietly. I remember too, she said. Sometimes she wet the bed in the middle of the night. I did not, Christy says haughtily from the bedroom doorway. I never ever did that. Mamma, still laughing, knelt and kissed Christy on the cheek. Time to leave for school, girls, she said. She began to button Christy's jacket. Oh dear, she said suddenly. Look at that. This button has broken right in half. Amory, take Christy with you after school to the little shop where Mrs. Hirsch sells the thread and buttons. See if you can buy just one match to the others of her jacket. I will give you some kroner. It shouldn't cost very much. But after school, when the girls stopped at the shop, which had been there as long as Anne Marie could remember, they found it closed. There was a new padlock on the door and a sign, but the sign was in German, so they couldn't read the words. I wonder if Mrs. Hirsch is sick, Anne Marie said as they walked away. I saw her Sunday, Ellen said. She was with her husband and their son. They all looked just fine, or at least the parents looked fine. The son always looked like a horror. She giggled. Emery made a face. The Hirsch family lived in the neighborhood, so they had seen the boy, Samuel, often. He was a tall teenager with thick glasses, stooped shoulders, and unruly hair, and he rode a bicycle to school, leaning forward and squinting, wrinkling his nose up to nudge his glasses into place. His bicycle had wooden wheels, now that wasn't available. Rubber tires weren't available, and it creaked and clattered on the street. I think the Hirsches all went on vacation to the seashore, Christy announced. And I suppose they took a big basket of frosted cupcakes with them, too, Amory said sarcastically to her sister. Yes, I suppose they did, Amory replied. Amory and Ellen exchanged looks that meant Christy is so dumb. No one in Copenhagen had taken a vacation to the seashore since the war began. There were no pink frosted cupcakes. There hadn't been for months. Still, Amory thought, looking back at the shop before they turned the corner, where was Mrs. Hirsch? The Hirsch family had gone somewhere. Why else would they close up the shop? Mamma was troubled when she heard the news. Are you sure? She asked several times. We can find another button someplace, Amory reassured her. Or we can just take one from the bottom of the jacket and move it up. It won't show very much. But it didn't seem to be the jacket that worried Mamma. Are you sure the sign was in German? She asked. Maybe you didn't look carefully. Mamma, it had a swastika on it. Her mother turned away with a distracted look. Amory, watch your sister for a few moments. And she began to peel the potatoes for dinner. I'll be right back. Where are you going? Amory asked her mother. as she started for the door. I want to talk to Mrs. Rosen. Puzzled, Anne Marie watched her mother leave the apartment. She went to the kitchen, opened the door to the cupboard. The potatoes were kept every night. Now it seemed that's all they had, potatoes for dinner. There was very little else. Anne Marie was almost asleep when there was a late knock on her bedroom door. Candlelight appeared and opened. Her mother stepped in. Are you asleep, Anne Marie? No. Why? Is something wrong? Nothing's wrong, but I'd like you to get up and come out to the living room. Peter's here. Papa and I want to talk to you. Anne Marie jumped out of bed and Christy grunted in her sleep. Peter! She hadn't seen him in a long time. There was something frightening about him being here this late at night. Copenhagen had a curfew. No citizens were allowed out after 8 o'clock. It was very dangerous, she knew, for Peter to visit at this time. But she was delighted that he was there. Though his visits were always hurried, they almost seemed secret somehow. In a way, she couldn't quite put her finger on it, but still, it was a treat to see Peter. It brought back memories of happier times, and her parents loved Peter too. They said he was like a son. Barefoot, she ran to the living room and into Peter's arms. He grinned, kissed her cheek, and ruffled her long hair. You've grown taller since I've seen you last, he told her. You're all legs. Anne-Marie laughed. I won the girls' foot race last Friday at school, she told him proudly. Where have you been? We've missed you. Oh, my work takes me all over, Peter explained. Look, I brought you something. One for Christy, too. He reached into his pocket and handed her 2 seashells. Anne-Marie put the smaller one on the table to save for her sister. She held the other one in her hands, turning it light, looking over at the rigid, pearly surface. It was so like Peter to bring the right gift. And for your Mama and Papa, I brought something more practical. 2 bottles of beer. Mama and Papa smiled and raised their glasses. Papa took a sip and wiped the foam from his upper lip. Then his face became more serious. Anne Marie, he said, Peter tells us that the Germans have issued closing orders for many of the stores by the Jews. Jews? Anne Marie repeated. Is Mrs. Hirsch Jewish? Is that why the button shop is closed? Why have they done that? Peter leaned forward. It's their way of tormenting. For some reason, they want to torment Jewish people. It has happened in other countries. They have taken their time here, have let us relax a little, but now it seems to be starting. But why the button shop? What harm is a button shop? And Mrs. Hirsch is such a nice lady. Even though Samuel, he's a dope, but he would never harm anyone. How could he? He can't even see with his thick glasses. Emery thought of something else. If they can't sell their buttons, how on earth will they earn a living? Friends will take care of them, Mamma said gently. That's what friends will do. Emery nodded. Mamma was right. Of course, friends and neighbors would go to their homes, or the Hirsch family would take them fish and potatoes and bread and herbs for making tea. But Peter would even take them a beer, maybe. They would be comfortable until their shop was allowed to open again. Then suddenly she sat upright and her eyes wide. Mamma, she said. Papa? The Rosens are Jewish too. Her parents nodded, and their faces were serious and drawn. I talked to Sophie Rosen this afternoon after you told me about the button shop, Mamma said. She knows what is happening, but she doesn't think it will affect them. Emery thought she understood, and she relaxed. Mr. Rosen doesn't have a shop. He's a teacher. They can't close the whole school. She looked at Peter with a questioning look in her eyes. Can they? Well, I think the Rosens will be all right, he said, but you keep an eye on your friend Ellen and stay away from those soldiers. Your mother told me about what happened at Osterbrigade. Emery shrugged. She had almost forgotten that incident. It was nothing. They were only bored looking for someone to talk to, I think. She turned to her father. Papa, do you remember what you heard the boy say for the soldier? That all of Denmark would be the king's bodyguard? Her father smiled. I've never forgot it, he said. Well, Emery said slowly, now I think all of Denmark must be the bodyguard for the Jews as well. And so we shall be, Papa replied. Peter stood. I must go, he said, and you, Longlegs. It is way past your bedtime now. He hugged Amory again. Later, once more in her bed, beside the warm cocoon of her sister, Anne-Marie remembered how her father had said 3 years before that he would die to protect the king, that her mother would too. and Anne Marie, 7 years old, had announced proudly that she would also. Now, she was 10, long legs, no more silly dreams of pink frosted cupcakes, and now she and all the Danes were to be the bodyguards for Ellen and Ellen's parents and all of Denmark's Jews. Would she die to protect them? Truly? Anne Marie was honest enough to admit there is a dark in the darkness to herself that she wasn't sure. For a moment she felt frightened, but she pulled her blanket up higher around her neck and relaxed. It was all imaginary anyways, not real. It was only one fairy tales where people were called upon to be brave, to die for one another. Not in real life, Denmark. Oh, there were soldiers, and that was true. And the courageous resistance leaders, who sometimes lost their lives, that was true too. But ordinary people like the Rosens and Johansons, Amory admitted to herself, snuggling in the quiet dark, that she was glad to be an ordinary person who would never be called upon for courage.